Hello, 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 and welcome to this episode, which is a little bit of a different episode than usual because it's actually an interview that I did with Amethysta Herrick on the Gender Identity Weekly podcast. Amethysta and I have become really good friends very quickly. She's a really epic human, very insightful, very interesting conversation. So I would very much recommend that you head over there and listen to that podcast as well, if you are so inclined. And this is an epic interview. I always love these. So please enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Trans Boss podcast, home of the Trans Boss movement, the place where empowered trans people come to discover what it takes to become the best versions of themselves. I am your host, Jasmine Vine, a Transfem trans empowerment specialist and the CEO of Javine, and I'm here to guide you on this empowering journey. In each episode, we'll dive deep into topics that matter to us trans people, like navigating through societal challenges, as well as building resilience and embracing an empowering mindset. We'll explore it all. We'll also bring on some incredible guests who are making a positive impact in the trans community. The Trans Boss podcast is your go-to resource for empowerment, hope, wisdom, and epic stories from empowered trans bosses across the globe. It's time to kick life's ass and create an empowered, authentic you. So without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Hi, kitty cats. I am Amethysta Herrick, your hostess for Gender Identity Weekly, a weekly discussion about identity and gender from the contributors and guests of the Purple Paw Publications website, Gender Identity Today. This content is brought to you by subscribers of Gender Identity Today. If you are already a subscriber, thank you so much for your ongoing support. Subscribers not only receive new content directly to their inboxes as soon as it publishes, but are also able to interact with every contributor directly, and that includes me, which, sure. So, if you would like to support shows just like this one, as well as other podcasts, videos, and written articles by our contributors, please consider subscribing using the links you're going to find in the show notes. Well, today I'm beyond honored to be speaking with Jasmine Vine. Hi, Jasmine.
Hello.
So Jasmine is there's just this long laundry list of everything you've done. You're a podcaster, certified master practitioner of NLP, timeline therapy, and hypnotherapy, all of which rolls up to the title you take as trans empowerment specialist. And of course, I always love transgender people helping the transgender community, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. How are you doing today?
Doing awesome. I'm excited.
There you go.
Excited to chat.
I hope so. I want to start. Your entire story is completely fascinating, and you were bullied as a child. You suffered mental health issues even after beginning transition. So after all of this difficult beginning, what gave you the inspiration to document in video your entire transition?
Oh, the first video I put out on YouTube, I did it with no expectations. I was kind of like, oh, this is just a fun thing to do, and then it really blew up, as in got 800,000 views on it before I had to take it down because I was switching channels. And then when I put it back up, it blew up again, over 1 million views, over 5 million, I think. So I was kind of encouraged by that and seeing people posting their comments in there saying how much that I'd helped them. And I was like, what? It's just like a video of just me being myself has helped these people. Mm-hmm. So that's what really encouraged me to continue putting videos out there and to, show people the hormone journey and what was happening at different months and the updates and all of that. It was really those positive comments from people who had their minds opened by it that encouraged me to keep going.
I see. You mentioned, 5 million views even. Was that something that you were like, oh, sure, this will be, were you prepared for that? That's a very immediate jettisoned into fame. I mean, what went
I
through
was
your
not
mind?
prepared for that.
Okay.
That was very interesting because with that came a lot of hate comments. And I
Yeah.
was 14 years old.
Right.
I hadn't really experienced that outside of, bullying at school. So to have that many people commenting on me all at that time was, it was a little bit shocking. I had, like news people reaching out to me wanting to cover my story and everything. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So yes, I was certainly not prepared for that. But you know what? It was a good entry into social media, that's for sure.
It was certainly trial by fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have regrets about that now? I mean, would you do it differently if it happened again?
No.
Really?
I don't. I tend to not hold regrets about the past because there's nothing that can be changed about it. So I prefer my focus to be on what I have influence over now and in the future. And it is what it is. I've learned what I've learned. I wouldn't call this a regret, but it's certainly as a result of that video going as viral as it did initially. Anything that I've put out since then has not performed to that standard. And so there's been this situation of like, oh my gosh, I started out so strong with it. And so now anything under that is like, come on, social media, do the thing.
Sure. But now you're on this podcast, and that should certainly blow you right back up again, right?
Woo!
Right?
Oh, goodness.
Well, what do you think? Was the world just primed for a young transgender story? Because you said 14. You were 14 when you published the first video, right?
Yeah. It was a time where particularly people who identified as guys who were like makeup artists and things like that, they were really blowing up on YouTube at the time. And when I posted that first video, it wasn't as a trans woman. I didn't know that I was trans at the time. I related to a lot of these people that I saw on YouTube. And when I posted it, I called it 14-year-old male to female transformation video. That's what I called it. And I think at the time, that was something that was really blowing up. So it kind of just hit at the right time. Right.
So at the time you weren't aware, or you weren't identifying as transgender?
No. Huh. It was a slow realization for me.
Okay.
Because growing up, my family wasn't really discouraging of my femininity. Because I'd always been very feminine. I'd always, you're wearing the Sailor Moon top right now. One of the first things I think of is like watching Sailor Moon as a kid and like imagining I've got these long nails and long hair and, transformations. Mm-hmm. And my parents would see that and go, oh, that's just a kid having fun. It was never judged. It was never, boys shouldn't do that. Like that wasn't a thing with them.
That's good.
And that, alongside what I exposed myself with on YouTube and all of that, I got to a point where I was like, boys can wear girly clothes, boys can wear makeup, boys can have long hair. And it literally got to the point where I was like, guys can be on hormone replacement therapy.
Fair enough.
So it just went through that to the point that I was starting to be gendered correctly, by people first from, behind, and people would mistake me as a woman. I'd go, oh, that feels nice.
Right.
And it wasn't a situation of guys can want to be women. I didn't get to that point. But
sure.
Yeah, it was pretty far along to the point that I was essentially presenting as myself half the time before I realized, oh, I guess this means I'm trans.
How long did that take? I mean, was it years?
No, It did happen pretty quickly. It would have been like by the time I was 16, I was living full time as
Okay.
myself.
Okay.
Yeah. So before that, it was like I started presenting as myself on the weekends or outside of school, wherever I would go, I'd present as myself. And then it just kept becoming more and more. And then, when I was 15, I was starting to identify. I didn't know exactly where I sat, but I knew I was a lot more feminine. And so even going to school, I was wearing like these circle lenses and makeup, and my hair was growing out, and I, came across as a lot more gender non-conforming. So yeah, it was kind of a transition of like boy to very feminine guy to to woman in the span of like a year and a half, probably.
Actually, doesn't sound all that atypical as far as gender transition goes. But do you? It's interesting. So you had mentioned hormone therapy, though.
Yeah.
You were able to begin hormone therapy earlier than 18?
Yes, I
Okay.
was.
Are we not allowed to talk about this? Is this a black
It
market
wasn't
hormone
legal.
therapy? Okay.
It wasn't legal. Yes.
Just asking.
Yeah, it's not something that I would recommend for anyone, but at the time I had been seeing a gender psychologist for a little while, and the laws where I was basically that we'd need to go to family court to get puberty blockers prior to 18.
I see. Yeah.
And it basically wasn't an option. Like growing up as poor as I did, we did not have the money to go through the court system for that. And so I was kind of given that as the only option. It was like, you're going to have to just wait until you're 18 and then get onto HRT. And that to me was just unacceptable. The dysphoria was really, really spiking at that time because I'm growing more and more facial hair and I'm getting taller and I'm growing, all of that's happening. So I was in the midst of that, testosterone really starting to affect me a lot more. Obviously, voice dropped and all of that happened. And I was like, it felt like they were saying, okay, you're going to have to just grow into a man before you do what you know that you need to do.
Right. Which incidentally
was very upsetting.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's the same experience that we're seeing in certain states here now in the United States, where they just go, well, you're not allowed to get any kind of transgender care until you're an adult. And then by then you're like, well, now I have so much to undo.
Yeah.
So I understand the difficulty. Of course, when I was a kid, and this was back in the late Jurassic era, actually. If you I had like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, I would walk to school as my little pet. I didn't even realize those kinds of things existed, and they did. I mean, WPATH, put out its first standard of care in 1979, and I would have been 9 years old at that time.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not something that, like, I even thought would ever be the case. And so, I mean, I got to tell you, if I had been, 9 years old or even 14 and seen your video, I think it would have done the same for me. I would have gone, oh my gosh, this opens my eyes to so many possibilities. And that being said, I have the feeling my family would have been like, no. If I said, listen, I'd like to do this, no, sorry, not going to happen. But that's an exceptional story. I have a question, and if it's too sensitive, please tell me.
There's barely any that are too sensitive.
Perfect. Great. Then I have a set of others. Hang on a second. I'll pull them out.
Let me get my binder out.
Right. Hard questions for Jasmine. I've got a chapter here in my... So you've struggled with mental health, and you've been very open about your struggles with mental health. When ultimately, I believe you were 17 the first time you entered a hospital, right?
To the psych ward, yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to be nice about it. I use the same terminology because it's much more shocking to say, oh, yeah, no, I've been in the psych ward like 4 times. Yeah. 5th time they sent me home. But, what was the question? Oh, right. So you were 17 years old. You had started hormone therapy by then.
Yeah.
You had 1 million to 5 million views on a video, catapulted into fame. The news people were coming after you. Did all of this contribute?
Oh, to what specifically? The mental health?
Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely did. It was a double-edged sword because earliest I can remember, I've always wanted to be in a situation where I'm helping people.
Sure.
And that's always been a primary driving factor for me. And so it was very freaking awesome to be in that situation where so many people are feeling helped by the content I'm putting out there.
Sure.
That was brilliant. Absolutely loved it. But with that, there was a lot of very nasty stuff as well. Like even, I shared about my dad passing when I was 11 and all this swath of comments come in saying, oh, your dad must have killed himself because he was ashamed of you. I'm like, whoa.
Wow, yeah.
They didn't hold back. Like the comments were very, very mean. And at the time, that definitely did affect me. Like I was in the doom scrolling kind of situation. I'm going through all these comments and I'm arguing with people and going, no, look at this article and there's a blah, blah, blah. And, back then I didn't understand that there was a difference between arguing with trolls versus educating open people.
Yes, very true.
Yes. So that's what I spent a lot of my time doing, and that was very taxing on my mental health because I was talking to people that were not interested in hearing another perspective.
No.
Which, in my naivety, I was, thinking that was a great thing to do, but not so much for my mental health. That's ultimately what led me to leaving social media for a few years.
Sure.
Putting my mental health first and deciding that I was basically going to go into stealth. And I did for a good 3 years there, and I didn't post at all. And that is a lot to do with those hate comments, a lot to do with how that did affect me. Because I got to a point where I was like, okay, I know that I'm helping these people, but all of this is making this suicidality much worse. So I kind of got to a point where I was like, I'm either not going to be here, therefore not able to help anyone, or I'm going to really stay in this space and potentially burn myself out and have a pretty negative consequence for that. And so I decided to step back, which I don't regret. That was something that I needed to do at the time. And over time, I've built a thicker skin, and I'm not very easily swayed by hate comments anymore. They don't bother me at all. And so now that balance is much better. I'm like, hate comments, it's like water off a duck's back. Don't care at all. So I focus on the positivity and I focus on the people that I'm helping. And that fuels me, and the other things just are irrelevant.
It's a good perspective. Is it just a thicker skin, or was it stability in who you are? Did you?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes to both of those.
Let me ask it slightly differently, because I'm curious. The two obviously are related, but I mean, there's an ability to ignore haters, but there's also the ability to see that what haters are saying is not even applicable to you. You know,
Yes.
when you believe what you're doing has been helpful not only for you but for millions of other people, hate comments are irrelevant, really. You know, it's a minority. So
Oh, I've got so much to say on this.
I know you do. That's why I asked the question. But
Yeah.
give me a small bit of it right first, because I have another part before we move on to something else. I mean, is it? Go ahead.
Hate comments can only affect you if there is a button to press. There needs to be a button that someone can press on for it to affect you. If that button isn't there, they can't press it, it can't affect you. So hate comments become like nowadays, if someone says, "Oh, you'll always be a man," I'm like, you might as well be calling me a blue elephant. I'm like, it's so irrelevant.
Sure.
Like, okay, sure. But part of this as well is understanding. A coach of mine uses this metaphor about the difference between salt and chili. So if you have a certain wound, and say like you've got a wound on your arm, if you were to put salt on that, it is going to sting. It's going to hurt a lot, right? Same as if you put chili on it. It's probably going to freaking hurt. If that wound is not there or it's completely healed and you put salt on it, you're probably just going to get a nice exfoliation. Like it's not going to hurt you.
Sure.
Because the wound isn't open and active. And it's the same thing emotionally. Right. If you have an emotional wound, or there's a certain part of you that believes your identity isn't valid, or you're not trans enough, or you're not this enough or that enough, and then someone throws that hate comment at you and it's that salt, it's going to affect you. It's going to hurt. It's going to be really painful.
Yeah.
If that is completely healed and you know your worth, you know who you are and you're completely valid in who you are and you understand yourself, you're going to be like, "Oh, thanks for that exfoliation. That's nice. Moving on."
Right. Usually people pay for these salt rubs, but I got one for free. Thank you.
Yeah.
You answered my question perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I agree with you. You also used two magic words, trans enough. It's interesting to me how that's the first thing we do. We go, "Hey, I think I'm transgender, but am I transgender enough?"
Oh, yeah.
Then you have to ask everybody around you, you know, "Do I seem like a girl to you?" And then if they go, you go, "Damn it, all right, I knew it." And then you go, you know, you throw away all your clothing and, you know, it's strange. But I bring this up, so it looked like you have something to say. Did you want to follow up on that?
Oh, no, the only thing I'm thinking is I left a little bit of a hook back there because I spoke about the salt but not the chili.
Did you want to finish the chili? I don't... Because if you have no wound there and you get chili on you, maybe it could irritate you, I guess. I don't know, but...
Yes. So it's really like a metaphor for boundaries. So the salt is an indication that there is something within yourself that needs to be healed, because the salt will not affect you if there's not something that needs to be healed within yourself.
I see.
The chili, on the other hand, is probably still going to affect you. So that's the difference between something that is an internal thing to look into and to heal versus something that is actually unacceptable behavior and needs to have a boundary in place.
I see.
So if someone is behaving violently, or, you know, they have close proximity to you and there's a threat to your health or your safety, that is chili. That needs to be stopped. And, you know, that's a totally different situation. So I do think that's important to mention, because there is things that will only hurt us if there's something within ourselves that is already hurt, versus things that are going to be hurtful regardless. And hate comments is an interesting one, because I think it kind of falls into both categories depending on what it is.
Yeah. I was going to ask, how do you distinguish between the two?
Yeah. That is a very tricky one, because the chili can still be an indicator that there's something within you to heal. It can still be an indicator to look deeper into, you know, things within yourself.
Right.
And it can be unacceptable behavior that should not happen. So it can kind of be both. Yes. Yeah.
Is there an obvious decision tree to figure out which it is, or it's ultimately looking inside, I guess. And well, I suppose using the metaphor, if you can heal the wound, at the very least, you're going to know if it still hurts, that it must be an external bit of hate, because you've taken away the button, as you said. The button's not there to press. It's a good metaphor.
I look at it on an emotional and a mental level. So emotionally, if a hate comment comes to you and it makes you feel super emotional, something comes up, say, oh, you'll never be a woman. Like, okay, cool. Ouch, that hurt. Let's just pretend that hurt. We can go, oh, where have I felt this before? And then immediately you can link that emotion to that event, to something in your past, most likely. Oh, when I was playing dress up with my cousins, my mum came in and said, oh, you're not a girl, put this stuff away.
Sure.
You know, if you can link it back to something like that in your childhood, where there's unprocessed emotions, or there's resentment, or there's, fear or anger or sadness or whatever, that is an indication like, okay, if I resolve that, then this thing, someone saying you'll never be a woman, isn't going to hurt as much because it's not linked to this.
Sure.
On the other hand, if we're looking at it from a mental perspective, that's looking at our beliefs and our thought patterns and whatnot. So someone says, you'll never be a woman. What do you actually believe about yourself? If that is hurtful to you, and it's not hurtful on an emotional level, but it could be hurtful on a mental level, then that's an indicator that, okay, perhaps on some level, I don't believe that I'm a woman enough, or that I'm, good enough to blend into society, or whatever the case may be. And so again, that's an indicator that, okay, there's a belief within me that is allowing that to hurt me. If both of those are resolved, that thought is just a thought. You're like, okay, cool. Moving on. It's not hurtful anymore. Now, for me, there's a difference in proximity. If someone is in my physical proximity and they're saying that, that is much more of a threat than someone online.
Certainly.
Yes. So that's a factor in it as well, is online, it's salt. Doesn't bother me at all. I can ignore that. I will never hear from that person ever again. If I find out they live 5 minutes from my house and they stalk me at the shops, that's a different situation.
Very different, yeah.
Now it's chilly.
Got it.
I
was leaning toward really that last, thinking that it really depends on proximity. Because I mean, when you mention a root memory, or even a root belief, some of those are very difficult to find. I mean, that's why we have things like EMDR and hypnotherapy, even, to attempt to process those things, because we may have pushed it from conscious acknowledgement. I don't want to say memory. We've pushed it from conscious acknowledgement. So I don't know, difficult, still difficult. The processing steps, tough. This leads into a question I'd like to ask, if that's okay. I don't want to move on before you're ready.
Oh, good.
So I alluded to, 1979, I was 9 years old. When you mentioned Sailor Moon, by the way, that you were watching Sailor Moon shows, I thought, I did the same, only it was Linda Carter and Wonder Woman. And, I thought, I'm not going to say that, because if I say that, people are going to go, God damn, she's old. I didn't know she was that old. Jesus.
It's the same situation. It's the transformation, like,
Yes, I would do that when nobody was around. Certainly, like, I'm not going to do this like in the middle of a like school or something. But I would do the spin around like Linda Carter would do. Yeah. I'm typically falling over because I didn't have really good balance, which incidentally got better. I started hormone therapy, and for some reason my balance got better. And I know, it's weird. I think it was actually because I started doing something that showed I valued myself. And then I was more aware of, I had more situational awareness. I got a lot of thought around that, but I want to move into the actual question because I started this whole process. Sorry, I kicked something down there and I'm like, what the hell was that? I started this whole process when I was 52. And I personally never experienced guilt or shame for my gender. I just assumed it was who I was, and other people had something wrong with them. And, or just, a lack of understanding. Let me say it like that. So when you started at 14, or I guess, hormone therapy at maybe 16, it seems like there would be less shame and there might be less risk, a sense of less risk than if you're in your 40s or your 50s or your 60s. Obviously, you can't speak for anybody other than yourself. How would you respond to that?
The further you go along in life, the more you establish, the more and more that risk builds up. So the younger you transition, the less risk there is. Absolutely. Because you haven't built a life yet. You're not in a career path. You don't have a family. You haven't had kids.
Sure.
You don't that whole situation. All of that adds another layer of risk to it. Am I going to be, sacked from this job? Am I going to lose my wife? Are my kids going to hate me? All of those types of things. Massive risk. And especially for, those assigned male at birth and, transitioning later on in life, often they will benefit from the way society is set up in the sense that they'll have higher incomes.
Of course.
Things like that.
Yeah.
And so that adds another layer of risk again. It's like, we were talking about this just before we we started recording, but that whole misogyny and prejudice that comes up afterwards that we can experience both ends of it. That is a massive risk for some people because if they're really established in their career and they're, a professional and they've done a certain thing for many years and then suddenly people start mansplaining things to them.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that, having gone from executive management to, some schmo at the grocery store saying, well, let me tell you how this macaroni and cheese things work. And I'm like, I think I got it. Just give me the box. I think I got it. But
yeah.
So risk certainly, and entrenched privilege. Completely agree.
Oh, yeah.
What about guilt and shame, though?
Oh.
Did you have any guilt and shame before you transitioned?
Oh, that I have to really dig for that. Was there guilt
Good.
and shame around my transition? I don't think there actually was. There was a certain amount with the bullying side of things, but that didn't matter to me as much as the family side. And there was never any guilt or shame around my identity from them. As horrible as they were in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, in every other story, they were okay in one regard. That's good.
Yeah, that was one where was not ever shamed. So I don't feel I did have a lot of that. It was more so after transitioning and not fully accepting myself and say in the dating world, for example, there would be a lot of shame that would come up in that situation. So I think it's situation based as well, where comparison starts creeping in. I'm like, oh, is this person, attracted to me as a person, or are they a chaser, or are they blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Yeah. So there would be some certain bits of shame that would come up in that. And I spoke about this on a recent podcast episode about like my dating experiences. And I spoke about a few situations where I had put myself in dangerous situations in dating. And there was definitely some guilt and shame that I had to work through in relation to those experiences.
Yeah.
They were some things that I put myself in those situations because of my lack of acceptance of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back, I'm like, oh, okay, that's a choice, Jasmine. Cool. And I did have to process some shame and guilt around that. But other than that, I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
I'm like, here's all these situations of guilt and shame. But other than that, none.
But other than that, really none. Perfect.
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to take a little, like a tiny bit of a side road, but I'm going to come back to this road
Okay.
because I want to, because there's something I'm really dying to hear about. So you've struggled with mental health, and it's funny, you know, anytime I mention to somebody, and presumably you get the same, you go, yeah, I've had mental health problems. Almost invariably somebody goes, really? Somebody in the LGBTQ community who had mental health difficulties? Huh. Yeah, I know. It's not an easy life. Do you feel, however, because I have an opinion on this that maybe I'll tell you after. Let me actually ask the question. Do you feel that the struggle that you had to face with mental health is a benefit or a detriment now when you go to help other people?
Oh, benefit massively.
Why is that?
Absolutely benefit. Because without those experiences, I could potentially read from a textbook. I could say, oh, these are the things that people experience with this kind of thing. And I could,
Sure.
possibly still help them, absolutely. But without that personal experience piece, I wouldn't be able to connect with them on that deeper level. So that to me is invaluable. And when I was in my suicide crisis counselling role, there was a particular situation where a trans woman was on the other line with me. It's a suicide crisis line, so obviously she was not in a good situation.
Sure.
She was explaining her situation and what was going on, and me listening, I was like, you are explaining me a couple of years ago. Like,
Sure.
I relate to this so deeply. But typically in those types of roles, there's a massive expectation that you don't share anything about your own personal experience.
Right.
And so, I'm listening and I'm affirming, I'm reflecting back, feeling and all these things. And we got to a certain point in the call where she was like, you know what, you probably don't understand it all, and hung up. And it was absolutely freaking gut-wrenching. And it's one of those core things that I think about that was when I remembered how important it was for me to share my story and to share what I was experiencing.
And that's what caused you to come out, I was going to say, but it's what caused you to return to the public eye, you're saying?
Absolutely, it did.
Oh, gosh. Oh, my gosh. What a good story. Do you... Go ahead. Do you think...
Oh, it's just massive.
There are many people who go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist even expecting to be able to work through some of the issues that we do. That I'm sorry, when I say people, I mean transgender community.
Yeah.
Expect to be able to work through this with a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Do you feel that's something possible or no?
Yes, it depends what the person is wanting from that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the clients that I work with, both in the mental health space and in the voice space, they come to me because they've had experiences where they've seen other people and they haven't felt understood, or they've felt that there's, something missing. Like in the voice space, for example, there's so many people that come to me and say, oh, I was seeing this speech pathologist and she was really good. And, she seemed really nice and everything, but there was just this lack of understanding around certain things. And so I had to constantly explain myself and describe things. And so talking with someone who has lived experience as a trans person eliminates all of that. You can come into the situation and go, okay, I'm here to work through this thing. And all of that background information is unnecessary. We don't need to go into it. Or the most someone will go into it, so they're like, oh yeah, I had, this experience with my dad and he said blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh yeah, totally understand. Because I do, because I've seen it so many times and I've experienced it myself.
Sure.
And so there's kind of this camaraderie or this nod between trans people where we're like, you get
Certainly. It. Yeah, certainly.
And I think that's very valuable. Like that to me is a very valuable thing. And, a lot of the reason I do the mindset work that I do is because I want trans people, like more trans people, to be in a mental health space where they're able to step up and help other people.
Sure.
Because the more trans people we have, the other trans people who are like in the pit and really struggling can connect with. I honestly think that would make such a massive difference to have that support for trans people by trans people. I don't know if I exactly answered the question. I went on a bit of a tirade there.
No. No, it was perfect. And because there are thoughts I want to express. But what I'd rather do is tell you that I'm coming back to the earlier point. That was our side road. Because now what you do is help other people. And I would take the guess. Part of the reason why I wanted to ask you about guilt and shame is that I would guess when you're trying to empower transgender people, the primary barrier you reach is a sense of guilt and shame. I'm not allowed to do this. I shouldn't be allowed to do this.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that at all? What you do to address it?
Oh, that is a journey. That one, because it depends on the person's upbringing. It depends on, what they have experienced previously. Because like for me, speaking from my experience, there wasn't much guilt or shame around the trans identity.
Right.
It wasn't as much of an issue. But for people who, let's say someone who grows up... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would get... Because when I've had conversations with people who do have a lot of guilt and shame around that, I've had some difficulty relating, which is why I wanted to take that sort of circuitous route to say, have you had guilt and shame? Do you feel experience is necessary? Now that you're helping people primarily focused on, or primarily barred from progress. So I'm asking you, because I like when people have said, I feel a lot of guilt and shame, I go, that's a bummer.
Oh my goodness.
And I don't have a good answer. I just go, I cut it out.
Yeah.
But that's why I asked the question. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Finish up what you were going to say.
Oh gosh, I've got no idea what that thought train was. Let me think.
Glad I interrupted. Sorry.
No, when people are going on the journey to healing from that guilt and shame, the environment is a very important aspect of that. A lot of people try to heal that while they're in a situation that is consistently adding on to it.
Yes, right.
So if they're like in a relationship with someone that doesn't accept them and is constantly going, oh, no, I want the old you, like the person that I fell in love with, or blah, blah, blah. That is a very difficult environment to drop guilt and shame in.
Yeah.
So often it is a slow road where people are slowly coming to terms with what their gender might be and what they want their expression to be and how they want to show up in the world and, all of those initial exploratory things. And then over time, it's looking at what has contributed to that guilt and shame in the past. Has it been bullying? Has it been evangelical Christian family? Or has it been like, where has those experiences come from or where have those feelings come from? And then what in my current environment is contributing to that? What is feeding it?
Sure.
Because you need to deal with both. We need to go back and heal the things from the past that are contributing to that, but then also look at the present and look at how you're changing your future to make that less of a trigger. And that's why one of the biggest things for most trans people early in their transition is to find accepting community and to connect with other trans people and people that see them as themselves and all of that. That's a crucial step in the process. So yes, environment, what's happened in the past, need to address both of them, because otherwise there's going to be something that's fighting against you from letting it go.
Right. And that supportive environment is one of the first things that helps you say, yes, I am trans enough.
Yeah.
So just to go back to, you thought I wasn't going to end up making that U-turn, but I did finally get there. We were on one big roundabout, and
or in Australia we would call chuck-a-yui, but anyway. Yeah, that's what we say.
It's a what? Chuck-a-yui?
Take a U-turn there and say, chuck-a-yui at that next street.
All right, perfect. Perfect. I'm going to start using that so that people go, the hell are you from? And I'll go, I'm from Los Angeles. Why? And they'll go, I don't think that's an LA thing. But I don't care. Right. But it'd be fine. It'd be fine. When I lived in the deep south in the United States, people would go, well, you're clearly not Southern. And I would say, I am too Southern. I'm from Southern California. And they would go, not quite the same. Yeah. It's funny. I'm telling you a joke. Have you been to the United States?
No, I have not.
Yeah, it's always good when you tell somebody a joke and they go, I got no context. Like, well done. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, I know the disparities with the Deep South versus the California.
Sure.
I work with enough people from the States to understand that.
Right, okay.
For the most part, though, it's usually relevant to, we call it the West Coast privilege for people feminizing their voice. Because anyone on the upper West Coast of the US has a much easier time feminizing their voice, particularly with accents and the consistency of resonance that they're able to hold, just because of it's a thing. There's a West Coast privilege. So we do have a bit of a joke about that in FEMVOICE skills.
Interesting. I want to talk to you more about that, but maybe not right this second. But because I have actually spoken to, gosh, I don't even know. What is it? Three speech language pathologists on this show. And I'm, I love asking this question. I don't know that I asked it of the third, but do you have an opinion on whether a transgender vocal coach would be better than a cisgender vocal coach?
I mean, my opinion is pretty strong that yes, a transgender vocal coach would be better.
What a stupid question I'm asking you.
For trans people, by trans people.
Sure.
Again, it's that understanding. And for me, it's, again, it's not having to describe anything. I can
drop my voice down and I can explain, what does it sound like when I lift the resonance? And then what does it sound like when I make the pitch higher with that kind of sound? Then what does it sound like when I make it lighter, make it lighter, make it lighter, make it lighter? So I can demonstrate all of those things and show people where they're at, where they want to get to. Cis women vocal coaches can't really do that, as speech pathologists. So
true with pitch, certainly. Well, and with resonance as well.
Or not to the extent of it, because of the effects of testosterone on a trans person's vocal cords and, our vocal tract and all of that.
Agreed.
We have a wider range to be able to demonstrate things. So that usually makes people feel very comfortable.
Oh, certainly. There is though, I'm watching you. You have you're doing this with your hands, and you moved some hair out of the way, and hang on, no, hang on, because there's a point is now with the way you're smiling. There are, and you're not quite looking head on, right? I mean, there are cues, feminine cues that are very subtle that I think that I watched for 52 years for what it's worth, because, you know, when I was in graduate school, I really threw myself into, at the time, I guess, just dressing up. And then I looked into transition in 2001. But my point being that my cisgender voice coach was able to demonstrate that, was able to mirror that back. And I think there are subtle cues that, I don't know. There are subtle cues that I think you really need observation to do. Now, that doesn't mean you need a voice coach to pick up these cues, because you can go out to just, you know, the mall and go, look at those people. I'm watching them talk, or watch a movie. It doesn't make a difference. But so it's an interesting, you can demonstrate pitch and resonance more deeply than my cisgender voice coach could have. And she had more years of I mean, because then again, you also transitioned very early on. So, you know, I think I've gotten to a point where I've run out of things to say. So maybe I'll just go, what do you think?
Oh, gosh, I don't know.
Right?
I mean, you got me thinking about something kind of interesting, is that when a person grows up and they're socialized as a woman, or, you know, as a girl, as a woman from the get-go, there are certain cues that they will express that a trans woman would be able to learn from more so than from most other trans people. It's kind of interesting.
I think so. I think so. I grew up with 3 sisters, and my father was pretty absent. I think it was kind of close to almost being socialized in a, you know, as a girl. I just assumed I was. So and that doesn't mean that I can, that I can do what you just said. I will say that, you know, there are cues that I know. Sometimes I'll watch, you know, it could be beautiful transgender person, wonderful voice, and then the way that person's looking at you, I just kind of go, ooh, maybe this isn't a cisgender woman, because it's a different cue. So anyway, just a random thought.
I don't know how we got to that, but it's interesting.
I'm not sure. I have one final question that I wanna ask, because now you do all this coaching. I don't know how many people you've coached. I believe hundreds. I think I've heard you say, right? Not quite 1,000, but hundreds. All right. I have an opinion that the biggest contributor to and I'm just going to go out there and say it, the biggest contributor to passing is believing you are a woman. It's that conviction that you go in someplace and you expect to be treated like a woman, not that you expect to be treated like a transgender person, but as a woman. What do you feel about that?
Oh, well, this goes a couple of different ways. Because internally, if you believe that you are a woman and there is no doubt in your mind about it, that is going to have an effect on how you filter information that you see in your environment.
Yes, right.
And so all the information is always present. However, what we focus on and what we see shifts depending on what we believe. And the best example that I've got of this is like, when I was younger and I believed that everyone was looking at me and laughing at me because that was the experience that I had.
Sure.
I would walk around looking very sus. I would be looking at the ground and I'd be like nervously looking up every now and then.
Right.
And that gives off certain cues. That has like an energetic effect on the people around us when they see us or perceive us.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with, if you don't believe that you are a woman, you're going to have that same energy about you. And people might not even be able to pick up on it's what you're thinking about. They might just go, oh, there's something a bit off about that person. don't know exactly what it is.
Right.
And
but
then they might
enough.
find out the person's trans and go, oh, that must be what's off.
Yeah. And that second thought that they have, though, it's enough to make them look a little closer or a little more closely.
Absolutely.
Sorry. I should have used an adverb there as opposed to an adjective. But
well, you look into something if there's something to look into. If someone perceives that there's something to look into.
Right.
This is a horrible example, but when I was younger, my family wasn't the most upstanding of citizens. They would teach me how to steal.
Sure.
Right?
Like
From
you
shopping
do.
centres. But one of the things that they spoke about, which is very interesting when it comes to this topic, is if you do not look like you are doing anything wrong, no one is going to question you.
Nobody thinks you are. Right.
And that's early in my transition because I had no money and whatnot. I would steal makeup and stuff from shops.
Certainly.
Fairly often.
Same. Yeah,
in those
of course.
younger years.
Yeah.
But the thing that really stands out to me with that is if you're walking at a reasonable pace, and oh my gosh, I'm giving people advice on how to steal. Don't take this as... I'm not endorsing stealing.
I suppose it's a good point. Although for what it's worth, I'm like, no, this was an amazing example because I think it's totally true. If you go in there and you go, look, I'm not at all suspicious, people aren't suspicious of you.
No.
It's a great
what really
point.
solidified that for me as a kid is like I was in a shop and I was playing around with one of the things from the shelf, and parents were like, no, we're not getting it, we don't have the money, whatever. And I was still playing around with it, and it was one of these metal pins where you press into it and you can put like your handprint in it and stuff.
Oh yeah,
I put it on my head.
Okay.
I put it on my head and was like, oh look, it fits there, and I forgot about it. So we walked out of the shop with this thing on my head. I literally forgot about it. And my mum was like, what's that on your head? And I take it off. I'm like, oh.
Let's just go home.
Yeah, we did actually. Yeah.
Good.
But at that time, that's what really clicked to me. I was like, I didn't even know that I was accidentally taking that out of the shop. I didn't even know. And so I just would have came across as a regular kid doing regular things.
Right.
It wouldn't have been suspicious at all. But that's the thing. Not knowing that I had that thing on my head is almost the same as not knowing that there's anything about me that could clue on someone to think that I'm not a woman or whatever. If that's not even in my awareness, then people are going to look at that just as they did at the kid. Oh, it's a kid being a kid. There's a woman being a woman. Right.
I'm glad we had this conversation.
And again, not endorsing stealing. Oh my gosh.
No,
it's
I was
good,
actually. I
example,
do have to go shopping right after this, so actually, it's a perfect timing.
Oh my gosh.
No,
big gay do crimes, as they say. No.
Yeah. Luckily, I went shopping before I got on the podcast, so that's good.
Excellent.
We're almost out of time. Can you tell me how people can find you?
Yes. So it's a bit difficult to find me now that I've changed from my stage name of Jasmine Lee to Jasmine Vine, because whenever people search Jasmine Vine, they get plants popping up.
Yes. Do you know how often I've put that, and then I go, oh, God damn it, I got to remember everything.
Oh, my gosh. I know. But if you search Jasmine Vine Trans on YouTube, it will come up. But anyway.
That's what you need, yes. Right. I have found plenty of information about horticulture, though, so it's been very valuable. So
Excellent.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks. Learn something.
Very well.
So how else do people find you?
It is Jasmine Vine everywhere. So jasmine.vine on Instagram is one of my main platforms. Same thing on TikTok. YouTube, again, you might have to search trans with it on YouTube to find me.
Right.
And then other than that, my website, javinecoaching.com is another place you can find me. That's about it.
All right. And now we'll have all of those in the show notes. Actually, I've got Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok that I've got right now.
Excellent.
So there you go. Cool. All right. Well, Jasmine, I definitely want to say thank you to you. And I certainly want to thank everybody who's been listening. I am Amethysta Herrick. You're listening to Gender Identity Weekly with Jasmine Vine, where we've talked about, all the things. Let's see, empowerment, how to be a regular kid doing regular things. Thank you so much, Jasmine.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's an awesome conversation.
Good. I hope so. I hope you weren't going, oh boy, when does this end?
No, not at all.
No, but if you have more tips and all for the 5-finger discount, maybe start putting some of those on Instagram.
5-finger discount?
Yeah, it's when you pick something up and you steal it. That's the...
Oh, I've not heard of that.
I'm trying to remember where I got that. I don't even... It's like something you'd see in a 1930s movie or something where, kids walking out of a drugstore or something, and the police comes walking up with his what are those things? Billy Club? This like says, hey kid, what are you doing? You think you got a 5-finger discount or something? Give me the goods. Something like that. That's which I sort of... So I don't know where the hell that came from, but...
Oh my goodness.
But I apologize.
You're stealing a chocolate bar, I see. Take that back to the shop.
Right. I'm heading back to HQ, Chief. Do you need another chocolate bar? I found another kid.
Oh my gosh.
Perfect. I'm glad we can do this stupid improv. Yes. Do you know, I am likely not to edit this at all, because as soon as you get funny, jokey stuff, it's always at the end. And I hope people kind of go, they go, oh, well, there was like some serious crap, and then, and then they were going to go. And that's where the good show started. That's what I hope.
That's where it turned into a comedy show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and people, they'd rather hear comedy than otherwise. Maybe not. I don't know. Some people love dramas, and I just go, in moderation.
Bloody episode on that.
Right. So, all right.
Dear.
I will actually shut it down. I even did like the good ending, and it wasn't a bad ending because you had said, if you just look like a regular kid doing regular kid things. I was like, wow, that was pretty good. I'm going to use that at the end. And now we've gone like 2 minutes past. So well done, us.
Woo.
All right, Jasmine. Thank you again. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Talk soon.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Trans Boss podcast. If you support the Trans Boss movement, it would help immensely if you could leave a review on your favorite podcasting app, follow us, and share your biggest takeaway from this episode on social media. Don't forget to tag me at jasmine.vine on Instagram, because I would love to see it. Now get out there, do the things, and take the next step into that empowered life you deserve. See you next time.